Well, good morning, everyone. It's 8:30 on this very fine day of March 1st. Welcome to a new month and the second calendar quarter of the year. Time is flying by. No, wait, January, February, March. Sorry, we're in the third month of the first quarter. I'm ready to move it along, I guess. All righty, so I'll gavel us in. This is Chair Catherine Harrington. With me this morning is Vice Chair Jerry Willey and Commissioners Pam Treese on video. On off camera right now, we have Commissioner Fye, and in about 15 minutes or so, she will be joining us on camera. I'm not sure where Commissioner Rogers is at the moment, but I'm sure he will join us as he is able. So the first item on our agenda today is board and leadership communication. Who would like to dive in first? Go ahead, Vice Chair Willey.
Yeah, I got a couple of different things that I've done this past week that was a little bit out of the norm. So, well, first of all, we did, thanks to Aaron Doyle, we've been doing some gain share interviews. So I did one of those with Representative Weber and Representative Noble, I think the week before. And so those are always interesting to be able to have direct conversations with our representatives. But the interesting thing is we are hearing a lot about Ordinance 883, which is the extension of Cornelius Pass and certainly along the Willamette water line. So I went out and visited an old friend of mine whose property is being perfectly split down the middle from the water line. We went out and everything is all staked out. If I would go out there today, I would see that they've already begun to start digging, but that's certainly coming. It was interesting to literally walk the path of the pipeline and then to see how it also intersects with that little community that is very concerned that the extension of Cornelius Pass is going to bifurcate their community. So that's kind of next steps next week is I'm going to go into that neighborhood and have a meeting with those folks. But it's always interesting to be able to physically walk out and see something that we're talking about here in work session and certainly in our board meetings. Last week we had the Cfo interviews, and so stay tuned for that. All of that information is in the hands of Tanya, so she can report on that or not. But anyway, that was interesting to have those interviews. And then the other one was I had reached out to Hampton Lumber and Banks to try and explain to me a little bit better what carbon sequestration does in our forest department, in our forestry, our trees. And it was very interesting to have it explained and to know that that our forest absorb a lot of carbon out of our atmosphere, and probably from that standpoint saves our lives because we have much better breathing air. I'm looking for a statistic because I don't want to get this wrong. I think that I was told that when you buy a regular old 2x4 and they're good quality and they're heavy, about 75%, 60% something is carbon. And so it's an amazing thing what nature does and how our trees absorb that. And I'm certainly trying to understand that a lot more to try and obviously track with the forest management plan and the conservation plan that goes alongside of it. So I appreciate Laura at Hampton Lumber taking some time to educate me on that, and I will continue to do my homework. And then of course yesterday we had the WACA tour. And yesterday noon, Chair and I went to the joint State of the Cities with Forest Grove and Cornelius done by the two mayors there. And that was always good to hear updates and what's going on with those two cities. And so with that, I'll stop.
Welcome, Commissioner Rogers. Who else would like to dive in? Well, if you don't, I will. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
I was struggling to find my mute button. You would think that that was an automatic response, but somehow it's not.
We need a big, easy button, huh?
Just boom, one of those buttons. So it has been one more busy week. I am leaving. I just want to remind everybody today that I'm leaving today at 10 o'clock to go attend the ribbon cutting at the Patricia Rieser Performing Arts Center. So just so that you know, and I will return as soon as I can, but that's where I'll be. So this past week it was busy. I met with members of the Spring Ridge HOA about their concerns regarding short-term rentals in that area. And I had information from Suzanne about that, and I could give them at least a broad time range in terms of what we're doing. But they're eager to get regulation in place regarding short-term rentals. The other thing that they talked to me about that wasn't related to the HOA, it was as individuals, they talked about the proposed gas station at West Union and 185th. So I brought them up to speed with what's happening there and some of the actions by the citizens in that area. I attended the MPAC meeting on Wednesday night. It was an interesting discussion. We talked about the draft values and outcomes for the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. There was also a really interesting report on emerging trends related to transportation and how that could impact policies and the consideration of the 2023 RTP update. For example, one of the trends is that transit service and ridership is down from pre-pandemic levels, which is no surprise to any of us. Telework is increasing, but these trends have got a gap in terms of they have disproportionate impacts on our low income and people of color. So it was a good meeting, good information. But at this point, no conclusions drawn, but more information based. I also met with Lamar Wise this week. I've been working as well as Commissioner Willie, and I'm sure many of you, in relationship to the gain share legislation and the amendment. So Lamar had testified, and I wanted to make sure that he had some information about gain share after watching his testimony. So he met with myself and with Aaron Doyle. It was a great meeting, and I provided information. And at that point, he was in a lobbyist capacity, so he's working for his employer, so to speak. So, but it was a really good meeting, and a big shout out to Aaron for helping me through that process. I've also met with representatives, as Commissioner Willie mentioned. I've talked with Representative Scouten, Reynolds, and Dexter on this issue. So again, kudos to our GR group and the work that they're doing in Salem. I know it's a thrash right now, and it's difficult. I did attend the ODOT kickoff, and I'm sure Commissioner Rogers will be talking about that. It's I think back to 4 years ago when we were talking about those auxiliary lanes, and it's really interesting to see them coming in now. So that was a good event. I also attended with the chair the Preschool for All last meeting in relationship to the task force that's focused on the Preschool for All before it moves into any pre-referral discussions. So that was our last kind of programmatic type of meeting. And yesterday, I appreciate the WCCA tour. WCCA, WACA. I'm just going to say WACA. I can't remember how many, but the WACA tour. It was really interesting, and it was a glaring look at what supply chain issues are all about. And it was a glaring look at what construction barriers are all about. When you've got a raised flooring to protect all the conduit and you can't get the flooring in, it's like the world stops. And it's really it was really interesting to see. But I think we've got a great team there. The location is really cool, and I was pleased to have the opportunity. So I'm very thankful to the staff to have that opportunity. So with that, I believe that's my report, and I will again leave at 10, and I'll be back as soon as I can.
Thank you for attending that. As chair, I certainly didn't think I could just cut out and go to that and then come back. So it's good to have one of us there. Commissioner Rogers, how about you?
Well, a couple of things. One, Pam, if you would, I think, extend on behalf of the entire board our congratulations on that center. It is unfortunate that they picked today. They could have picked any other day. It would have been nice. That's a wonderful addition to our county. Secondly, you mentioned the event the other day. It was cold and freezing, and so those of you who were unable to attend, I would simply say you saved a few of your appendages, because it was pretty doggone cold standing out there next to 217. But I mentioned that day, and I won't bore anybody again with it. But I have a couple of different photos throughout our office. One is I pulled it down the other day to see the date on it. In 1952, a local person gave it to me, and it shows downtown Tigard and all of the area around here. No 217, obviously, all farms, very small downtown area. So it's interesting. Then one in 1970 something, you can see 217, but for those of you who've not been here a long time, you might not recognize that 217 was just like any other road. I mean, it had stop signs, and it was just a surface road. It was very different than what we see today. So anyway, it's a great project. For you, Jerry, I met yesterday with your transportation committee for the Hillsborough, old habits, Washington County Chamber. I want to keep going back to Hillsborough, but Washington County Chamber, and heard a lot of perspective from some employers in your neck of the woods that were not dissimilar to exactly what I'm hearing down here, and exactly what I heard on a meeting over in Clackamas County on tolling and their concerns and some of the issues. It's very interesting to hear our business community and what their feelings are. So very interesting. I'll make a couple of comments for that when we get into an agenda item today. But beyond that, I think I'll just stop with that.
Commissioner Rogers, if I could ask for that meeting yesterday, we often hear from portions of the business community that they want to see improved transportation throughput and access. And as we all well know, the rub is with funding, and in some places, community land constraints, a built environment. Did the meeting yesterday give you a sense for what they were willing to invest in?
Yeah, I've heard it down here as well, from the Tualatin Tigard area. I've talked to many elected officials here as well. There is no one who is opposing additional funding for improvements, as long as the improvements are done. Diversion is a huge issue. People do not necessarily want to fund those levels, and they're a little confused about certain kinds of comments in regard to I guess what we would call congestion pricing. The terms get really mixed, but some in the region would like to say no new pavement anywhere, and no new pavement in regard to this project, and they're adamantly opposed to that and see no value. If that's the case, nobody wants to pay a toll if they don't get something for it. So it's very clear. They're not anti-tax. They're anti-taxing without any benefit. That's the issue. So anyway, thanks for asking.
Yeah, thanks. Commissioner Fye, how about you?
At your hand, and I'm almost there. Can you
Okay.
go first, and then I'll go?
Yes, absolutely. So last week, I had to remind myself it was a 4-day week, but there was a lot done nonetheless. Wednesday morning was the Westside Economic Alliance Board of Directors meeting. Commissioner Treese was there for part of it because there was a presentation on the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol District Levy, and asking WEA for their political support, which they gladly gave, given the role that the levy plays in ensuring that the neighborhoods of the urban unincorporated areas have appropriate staffing levels to be safe neighborhoods, thereby ensuring that via mutual aid, the surrounding cities are not detrimentally impacted. And then the developer of the affordable housing project at South Cooper Mountain, Wish Camper, came and spoke. It was all done verbally. It was not about the development proposal as is, though it is one of the region's largest with, I think, 324 units, but rather making a plea that construction costs have increased and there is gap funding needed. So area governments already know this, especially for that project. Our teams heard it, City of Beaverton's heard it, the community-based organizations have heard it, but nonetheless, an appeal for hoping somewhere under somebody's seat cushions, we may have some $1 million here and there to help that situation. On Thursday, I had multiple constituent meetings, and I want to give a big thank you to both Commissioner Treese as well as Commissioner Fye for providing me the joint opportunity to join them at these meetings. That way, you know, they weren't just serial and then trying to catch up afterwards. So thank you for those efficiencies and the learning opportunity with you. Commissioner Treese, I joined Commissioner Treese in a meeting with a couple of folks regarding the Thompson Road Kenny Terrace project. As you know, that's moving through the construction process. We are still a little bit challenged to ensure that the neighborhood community knows that the number of trees that will be installed exceeds that they already have. I looked at our website and it was a little hard. I couldn't find that information that we confirmed with our staff when we were going through a neighborhood meeting on that. I also met with Todd Schaefer, who I know from a different capacity, but he has been a member of the Washington County Public Safety Coordinating Council. He's now the chair. He's had some changes in his career, so we had a wonderful conversation about his volunteering and other pursuits. Commissioner Treese and I also met with Mary Manso of CPO 7 and the Committee for Community Involvement, continued concerns about the community engagement support that they're feeling, as well as questions around what revisioning may mean, and trying to continue to navigate that. I also had a meeting with the Nike Public Affairs Social Impact Officer worldwide, Jorge Casimiro. So it was good to meet with him. I introduced him to, well, without the, not actually introduced, but I sang your praises, Ms. Angie, as well as Ms. Tillmans, our Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer. Then thanks to Commissioner Fye, we had a meeting with Sunrise Beaverton, and it was a really, I guess in a way, enlightening meeting for me. Feedback from them and interest from them, I should say, coupled with that of other groups and community members, really struck me at how we have a lot of untapped potential and interest in adapting and responding to climate change. And for me, it hasn't been, can we or should we or might we, but rather given our operating environment and budget concerns, how can there be a solution path for moving forward? And so I'm really wondering about, given that climate change impacts the whole county, and there are so many aspects of the work that we do as an agency, might we consider putting some ARPA dollars into action to help increase community understanding and harness some of that potential energy and interest. So I know we'll be talking later in the agenda today about the climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking update. And I thought I would catch up with regard to our ARPA as well. Yes, Commissioner Treese, go ahead. Yeah, that old mute button.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to step in front of Commissioner Fye, but I just wanted to add to what you were saying there. And I forgot, I apologize for not mentioning the 2 constituent meetings that you and I had. But I also wanted to say that I met with Susan Mates yesterday from Tree Keepers about an interesting program that they are doing with volunteers to do an inventory of street trees. And we talked about the possibility of harnessing some of our volunteer efforts to help us down the climate change road, so to speak. So I will be learning more, talking to Ms. Angie, Mr. Carr, and Stephen Roberts, and then coming back with some ideas. So I wanted to let you know that consistent with what you were saying earlier. The other thing I forgot to mention is that I met with Taylor Morrison
back on that. So there are many members of Tree Keepers, Washington County, that are approaching us. And some of them, I know that Tree Keepers is doing work enabled by and in coordination with the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District, which applies to the whole county geography. And that the Soil and Water Conservation District is also tied in well with Clean Water Services and our Tree for All program. So it's a matter of, in a way, triangulating the different sets of information and the efforts. So
and I did mention that to her. So that was part of my process too. We talked about Clean Water Services. I didn't talk about Tualatin Soil and Conservation Group, but I agree 100%. And but I'm also thinking that if we can magnify our efforts with volunteer groups, I think that that's a positive for the community and for us. So we'll see how that works.
Yeah, I think fundamentally the problem is we're going to need to have an additional resource. We don't have the existing resources to steal away. So for me, me, I'm pragmatic. It's like, how do you realize a goal and what are the barriers? And I think we're going to have to, we don't have any additional resources to just throw into the hopper and coordinate. So that's why I wanted to help illustrate the high level picture and what I think is the barrier that's keeping us from doing more. So,
and I want to ensure that I mentioned that as well. And that's why I told her I needed to talk further within our administration to look at what our possibilities might be. So
yeah, I think this is one of those conversations or topics that we need to come back to at a roundtable as well, so that we don't all end up or have Ms. Angie hearing from. Yeah, exactly. So we're pulling in the same direction. Thank you.
Yes. And lastly, I wanted to mention that I had a really interesting meeting with Taylor Morrison. I've been meeting with them about some of the issues with, and Stephen Roberts, land use and some of the permitting and that type of thing. They have their project in South River Terrace has got some really interesting pieces that address middle housing. And for me, it's been hard for me to visualize what middle housing means. And in talking with them, it brought different pieces to light. And I suggested we talk further about that at a potential roundtable into the future or something like that. So I'm just offering up what my conversation was.
So, yep. So I'll come back to my report out.
And now I skipped over Nafisa.
I wasn't done, so.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'll make it quick. As Commissioner Treese talked about, we had the preschool for all task force meeting last Friday. So it was the major bulk of the programmatic work, but there are additional meetings that the technical work groups are following up on, because there were some questions based upon how, if there was to be a preschool for all, what kind of relationships and details would be sorted out with preschool promise. So truly the market is expanded versus cannibalizing one area for another. So from my standpoint, it boils down to there is some additional shaping and refining to be done on that side, but more towards the important details for how such a program might exist and roll out for success. But I think what Commissioner Treese was highlighting before there can be the referral efforts is clarity on how does this get funded and what does it affect and how do we take stock of what public finance looks like now and into the future. I did need to get anchored a couple of months ago around how does this potential program relate to the enhanced childcare proposals of both the federal Build Back Better, which is still stalled, as well as additional bills working through the legislature through the short session. And it really boils down to the state efforts provide additional capacity, but the wage improvements and the career development improvements to have a much more functional childcare ecosystem here in our region is not encapsulated by that state funding. But we do need that state support for sure, all across the state. I'll just add with the WACA tour yesterday, it was very useful to me to see how the supply chain issues are having rolling effects on our projects, because as an agency, we have additional capital projects moving forward, well, not just for Washington County, but also clean water services. And to see how that really, boy, I don't want to say we were naive, but we lived in a blessed time where just-in-time manufacturing and really tight supply chain made for high productivity, but we didn't have to deal with that many risks compared to what the uncertainty we continue to deal with now. And yes, Commissioner Willie mentioned the combined state of Forest Grove and Cornelius yesterday. Mayor Truax did a marvelous job as usual about covering not only the improvements in Forest Grove, but putting that in the context of history. And and Mayor Delane did a really nice job of outlining how that community has made terrific progress in various community developments that they've had, everything from the aquifer storage and recovery system, additional housing in their community, parks and so forth. So the residents of each of those cities have a lot to be proud of. And last night, the Forest Grove City Council was expected to move on a levy proposal for the May ballot for their levy that helps fund fire, public safety, and part of their general fund operations as well. So it was a busy 4 days. So not quite as hectic this week, but really some useful meetings. So thank you for listening. I know it was a lot to go through, but it was fun to share different learnings and activities. Good morning, Commissioner Fye. How about you?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair Harrington. That was gave me time to log in and switch off. So that was a lively conversation. I would ditto everything that the four of you talked about: the gain share, the walk-in building, and then the 217 auxiliary lanes project. Great job, Commissioner Rogers. You're a guest speaker at that project, and I really appreciate it. And it was a good learning for me to hear what you had to share. In addition, I had there's a maternal mortality and morbidity review committee that I sit on that was appointed by Governor Kate Brown. And last week we had our quarterly meeting, and it's about 5 hour meeting a day, but it feels like 50 hours, but it's a really good, I enjoy that work, and it feels like we're bringing spiritually justice to folks who died during childbirth. And so it's really good work. And I wish some of that stuff, the cases that we're solving, we can share publicly, but I feel good about some of the committees, especially one of those committees that I have, and especially when we know that we brought justice to somebody who isn't here and solved their problem, and we could prevent that death from somebody else or somebody else suffering through that. So that was a good way to end the week last week for me. What else? I think I will join you, Commissioner Trees, in saying good job to Aaron Doyle. I know Aaron Doyle, you're trying to get a hold of me last night, and with the 1 hour notice, our GR team is going through a lot with the 1 hour, and I think sometimes they have to track us down, and I think Aaron couldn't get a hold of me for a bit last night, and I'm sure she was panicking, but count me in for today, Aaron. I know that there wasn't any hearing you said scheduled last night, but there might be one tonight for gain share. So count me in if you need me for tonight. Other than that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair Harrington. Oh, one thing I forgot to say, I also had a really good discussion with our land use and transportation team, Aaron Wardell and Chris and Stephen Roberts and Chris Steffaback, and about the list of priorities. And I'm really excited. A lot of the projects the staff have identified, and look forward to what comes out of it and what bubbles up to be the top.
Yeah, we're all on the journey together to see if how equity does or doesn't impact the past, status quo advancement of projects. So yeah, we're learning together. Any last commissioner items that you might have remembered? Okay, well, let's move to leadership communications. Ms. Angie.
Good morning, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. I agree. It's been a hectic last week and it doesn't seem to be slowing up in the future. As your board is aware, Governor Brown recently announced the lifting of the statewide indoor mask requirement. As a Washington County team, we are focused on this requirement being lifted on Saturday, March 12th for most county buildings. Employees and others who are visiting or housed within healthcare, shelters, corrections, and detention settings must continue to follow the masking requirements of those specific areas while interacting with the community until further notice. County Administration Office is working with our departments and offices to prepare staff for this change and also to prepare for full reopening nearly after 2 years of having requirements in place. We are targeting softly around May 1st to be back in full county operations. The reason why May 1st is because we do have many employees who are still balancing various family needs, family care needs throughout all life cycle conditions. And so we are working with those employees in those areas of the organization. We also do want to emphasize normalizing wearing of masks. As the masking requirement is lifted, we do have employees and we have community members who are going to choose to continue to wear a mask, and we want to ensure that they feel comfortable doing so as we lift this requirement. This Thursday, as the board's aware, you do have a roundtable, which will be a great time to discuss what the board desires as far as future meeting formats. We have been meeting fully virtual. We have received great feedback from community members that virtual hybrid is beneficial to continuing to have ease of input. And so I think this would be a great time for the board to have that discussion at the roundtable. From a workforce standpoint, we only have one new COVID case this week, which is really news to celebrate from our employees. So we've seen a very quick ramp down of cases within our workforce, which is wonderful news. As far as a community spread, current case count is 133 cases per 100,000 population, which represents a 5.8 test positivity rate. And Commissioner Willie had mentioned the CFO recruitment process. I don't have any information to share. We did have several panel interviews last week, and I am still working through the decision-making process and hope to have information on that process in the near future. And that concludes my update.
Any questions for Miss Angie? No, Mr. Carr.
Good morning, Commissioners. I have nothing to report today. Thank you so much.
Ms. Taniguchi Dennis.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good morning, Board of Clean Water Services. The Clean Water Services team is real busy responding to calls for service associated with the heavy rain. There's been localized street flooding and et cetera that they've been responding to, but we don't have any structural flooding that's been reported yet. Hag Lake has been below the fill curve for the season. So this rainfall, the positive side of it is that it's helping us to improve our inventory of water in Hag Lake. There's been no reported sanitary sewer overflow. So overall, we're coming through this rainstorm well. Supply chain risk management is an enhanced area of focus for our operations and maintenance team, particularly with chemicals and parts, as well as for the capital projects team and construction management. We're really looking at pre-ordering of materials and equipment to really facilitate our capital projects. We're still getting great construction bids and progression on our projects, so the team will continue to focus on managing of the risk. We also have great news on the COVID front. The caseload is down to 1 employee that's positive and 1 employee exposure this week. So we ended February with 15 positive cases and 18 exposures, coming off of a January that had 39 positive cases and 50 exposures. So the team is breathing a very large sigh of relief, and they're implementing the operational changes associated with the state changes related to the mask. So all in all, the team is doing well. They remain positive, and we look forward to the chair's visit with our lab program, and the team is excited about that. Thank you.
So Daniel will be joining me there as well, which will be fun. Commissioner Rogers, go ahead.
Diane, just real quickly, thanks to Mark, and I know you probably had a hand in the response to the Times article in regard to the research that I think you and a number of agencies across the country are doing in regard to your COVID monitoring. It's groundbreaking. To talk about technology and the creative work that you all are doing. It's just outstanding, and I appreciate it. I hope that those in the CDC will finally understand that this is useful information, not to be somehow squirreled away until they can vet it to some other standard. But I think the New York Times, it was a great article, and they certainly are advocates, obviously, by the tone of their article for this work. So again, thanks for the response.
Commissioner Willie, Vice Chair Willie, go ahead.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that I had sent you all a copy of a letter from the Hillsborough Hops and their legislative ask of $17 million. They were informed late last night that they didn't make that, so we're not going to be. I won't be asking for your support on that letter, but it is a little bit of a snapshot of coming attractions because they will be back sometime in the future. And I will certainly bring that forward to you as I get that information too. But I just want to let you know that that's on hold for right now.
All right. Anything else, folks, before we move on?
Chair, we do have 3 letters.
Oh, that's right. They were very good too. So do you want to bring on the departments for that?
Clerk Moss, if you can, thank you. I see Stephen Roberts joining.
I thought there were 3 documents, but 1 letter, 2 documents related to the same topic that follows up on what we had previously with the JPAC discussion. And I want to say, mention to Commissioner Fye, our JPAC rep, as well as our staff, Mr. Roberts and Ms. Steffenbach, that first document outcomes was just, I greatly appreciate that. It's really at that high level that I know I was aiming for, so that we could articulate the higher level outcomes that we're looking for in support of our community, while still leaving the finer specifics of the legislative pieces open for all of you to work through the process. So helpful from my standpoint. Would you like to present that information or just have us dive in with questions and support?
I think we're happy to give a quick walkthrough if that's the board's pleasure. I'm here with Chris Steffenbach, our senior policy analyst. Chris is the primary author, so I'll look to her if that's okay to just walk you through it quickly.
Great.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, and good to hear that these outcomes resonate. So really what we have is, again, it's helpful to know where you are. As you, 3 of you sit on different committees where this is being discussed, and also staff will be continuing to work with, as you said before, the tactical side to present amendments to recommendations back to JPAC. So the introduction content section just recaps an understanding of your past positions and what has come to play as we understand the deep concerns throughout the region about how this all works together. And then the 4 outcomes are identified are really about the need for approach for a holistic program, one that shows how the 2 different toll projects fit together and give assurance that it will function as one program, not just one tolling section start and nothing to follow. And the second one really expresses concerns about diversion and the need to be on top of that when the tolling begins, but also that there needs to be a process for monitoring and addressing diversion over the long term, because as we know, travel patterns change. The third point has to do with engaging the local and regional partners in the process. And this is more than an update at JPAC when an action is needed, but really deeply becoming involved. And at the local level, this means particularly a group that can engage on the impacts and needs and monitoring on the diversion issue. And at the regional level as well, there are significant decisions ahead that the OTC faces on setting the toll policy and revenue, that we could avoid some of this current situation by having more engagement over time. And the fourth one continues to reiterate the commitments to center equity, and that financial transparency is one thing to have statements, but to know how is this going to move forward with commitments. So some demonstration of commitments, and how transit is such a critical part of the equity and providing options for non-toll options. So those are the 4 outcomes, and they are, so those are the 4 outcomes. The other is a letter simply expressing the same to the Oregon Transportation Commission, so they will know where Washington County is on this matter.
Commissioners, thoughts? Input?
I have thoughts, but I'd like to hear from Nafisa first, and then I'll jump in with some thoughts.
Go ahead, Roy, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. You and Stephen always do such a nice job of framing things, and I certainly understand what you're doing. Just for everyone's benefit, you all can support that. I'm going to abstain, and the reason I'm abstaining is this will come to the act, and I've always firmly believed that as I sit in that judicial capacity, that I don't need to prejudge. I need to take information from Hood River and Clackamas and Multnomah County, and then make some sort of comments based upon where this board is. So a little premature for me, but anyway, I'm not opposed to outcomes. I just think that it sends the wrong message as I try to adjudicate that issue. Chris, there's a few things that I would point out that Chris Strickler's letter, which I think was in part to a meeting that the city of Hillsborough and they invited me to have with him, as well as Bob Van Brockland, who's the OTC chair. They clearly indicate that this decision will be made by ODOT. We understand the regional interest, and we understand that the region has an MPO, which is a land use factor, but this is going to be made by the OTC with recommendations from everyone. Having said that, they have a time frame. They made it very clear that their time frame is only, maybe another month, couple of months out. And we know that there was interest in combining 205 and I-5. It makes sense. Everybody understood that. But I'm not sure the timing is there for that. And I'm not sure whether or not, and I don't want to say too much out of a meeting that was private, but I'm not sure sending that message is going to resonate a lot in that first bullet. In regard to the second one on the diversion issue, I've heard bucket loads on that. No one disagrees that it should be diversion, mitigation. What does that mean? There's no specificity. And in some jurisdictions, as you know, they would like to fix all kinds of things. And so there's a lot of questions, at least from business communities I'm hearing from, about we don't particularly want to pay tolls to fix others' roads. We understand the mitigation part, but we don't know what that really amounts to. No one's disagreeing that everybody should be involved in the rate setting. Revenue allocation policies, that's the big question on diversion. And the last one on the transit investments, just to throw it out for everybody's information, is that you're not going to find a bigger proponent than myself of transit. But if you take a look, you'll find that there's about 13 transit districts around the state of Oregon, and that doesn't include all the ones that are inside cities. If we're saying that there ought to be consideration in the design work for transit mobility, that's wonderful. You know, bus on road, whatever we can do. If there is an allocation of revenue tolls to transit districts that are really just in one MPO, that's a bigger state issue, very big state issue. So there's some things, again, I'm just pointing them out, what some issues are, has nothing to do with my thoughts on having outcomes. I think that's good to set direction, but I do know that there are some challenges. And for me, I just assume just individually, be very, just like when somebody brings something to our commission, I take very seriously my role as a judge in that process, to be very clean, listen to all the testimony. But I guess personally, I can't disagree with a lot of this. It's just early. But I do see that there are some problems. So that's the only comments I'd make. I'll stop.
So I'm a little confused because I understand you're a Washington County board rep to the ODOT Region 1. And we can still at least exercise the voice of the commission to a letter into both the regional conversations in advising the state, as well as in support of our own Washington County jurisdictions. I know that was part of the conversation at work session last week as well. So we can certainly document your abstaining from involvement on this as a result of your seeing a conflict with your duties on the Region 1 Act. I don't think that's a problem. I'm trying to offer that up as a solution based upon what I'm hearing you say. It's also a little puzzling to me in that you've had such a long history in submitting letters during processes as the Washington County rep to WCCC and as the chair of that body. So I'm just puzzled by the inconsistency, that's all. And I think it's important that we here take the opportunity to come to a current position, and it's not necessarily a final position during the process, as was illustrated to us last week, as the JPACT conversations continue and in response to the request from area mayors for us to support their needs. So I'll just put that out there. Commissioner Rogers, go ahead.
Well, first of all, in my role over the years, we weren't mixing as many proposals, almost like a ballot measure, where you're mixing different things. And so I don't see them as inconsistent. And I certainly understand the idea of trying to have some kind of parameters to deal with, but putting I-5 and I-205 together, this board has consistently over many years supported the Abernathy and the I-205. Critical issue. I personally, and I don't know where the board is, I personally support the bridge over the Columbia too. That bridge needs to be dealt with. Combining two projects though in a time constrained period is problematic. That's the problem in that first bullet. And in the second, where you're taking tolling and dealing with the impacted communities, you hear a very different message from the chambers in Clackamas County, as well as some of their elected leaders, as to what that means. So I really don't know what it means, and I don't know what Pam and Nafisa will say at their meetings. That's up to them. I don't make any judgment, but I do know that that's a very fluid issue. Nobody's arguing about the toll setting, and I'm reading off this as I'm looking at you. Everybody agrees that there ought to be an involvement. The transit, I think that it's critical, because I've been a big transit, that we have transit structural designs. But if this is operational money, then you got 13 districts around the state who say, how about us? I mean, are we going to get something on the next project? So we're presenting some really, I'm getting into the weeds, and I apologize. We're really getting into some issues that have statewide implications. And you got an OTC who's saying, we're going to make the call. If JPAC wants to say this is it, that's fine, and the project won't be done. And everybody will go down the road and say we tried. But we have a constraint. And so unless Chris Deffenbach, you can tell me that there's some new magical time period, that's great, but that's not what I've been told. And so that's the problem.
Chair, if it's okay, maybe I'll address a couple of Commissioner Rogers' comments. I think this is a statement of preference from the board. This is obviously, we understand. I think your board understands you're not the decision makers here. This is really just a statement of a desired outcome, and so I think to the extent that it helps the board and our staff to articulate a position at various tables around the region, then I think that helps. I would also just note, I think there's a lot of alignment in these sort of broadly stated outcomes with a lot of our jurisdictional partners. Of course, we're hearing from our cities that stand to be most affected by diversion, as well as the cities in Clackamas County, addressing, stating very similar, I think, recommendations. And so I don't feel like anything that we're suggesting here is out of line with what some of our regional partners are suggesting. And again, I think just in terms of having that broad framing of some desired policy outcomes just gives us some tools to be able to help lobby successfully as this effort moves forward.
Commissioner Treese.
Thank you. And Commissioner Rogers, I'm really glad you're here today, because I look to you as well as my other commissioners for guidance on these issues. And I want to hear and understand what all the perspectives are. But one thing that you said worries me a bit, and I'd like clarification from the standpoint that when I go to MPAC meetings, I feel very strongly that I am a representative of the commission, and making sure that I am representing what we agree to as a commission. It might not be fully, it might be a mixed support level, but whatever the majority position is, that's my job to represent that. So you mentioned that Pam and Nafisa can say whatever they want or something to that effect. And that concerns me, because I want to make sure that I am holding my responsibility and representing what the commission voice is, as well as others that are in those public settings. Am I correct in understanding that we are all representatives to these committees of the commission voice? Yeah, Rory, I guess I'm asking your opinion, because it sounded like you would accept a variety of voices, where I don't think that that's what I signed up for. or I should say, I don't think that that's what my responsibility is. That's better.
Well, thank you for asking, and I appreciate it. When I go to the Area 1 Act, I represent this county in your position. So whatever the majority of the positions are, that's what I'm going to do. Unfortunately, in this particular case, and I appreciate the chair saying, well, why don't we just note you abstain? I have two different roles. One is just like you do at Impact. One is to hear from the public and to come back with what the consensus of the group was and say, does that fit with the county's position? And I think I have to hear that. And I'm hearing different things from different parts of the not this region, but the greater Act. It's 4 counties. That's one. And secondly, as you know, I chair that committee, and they're expecting an unbiased, impartial, much as Shirley Craddock would do at JPAC. And I forget who the new impact chair is, but it's not to come in with predisposed issues. So my marching orders, if we want to call it that, would be whatever this majority of this board is. But I'm trying to not say, hey, this is what it is, and I'm going to use the gavel to gain what we want. So I'm trying to not go there. And then my other comments were, I know that there's some technical nuances in this stuff, and that's what's being worked at state level, way above my grade. That's way above me. But trying to make it as pleasant to work with them so that they can see and craft their responses in accordance with how we feel. So it's a bit of an art of, this stuff's all art of making sausage, right? And that's what it's about. So anyway, I'll stop because I don't mean to imply that I go out and do things myself, and you should either. I think we represent this board completely. It's just how we do that and what we're trying to get.
Thank you.
Chair Harrington, I'll jump in. Chris and Stephen, you guys did a really great job of distilling this whole big topic of tolling and putting in a one-pager. And I really appreciate your message to the OTC and also this one-pager of our desired outcome for the Oregon toll program. I really appreciate it. I think you really, like, one thing I would have liked in the introduction is, throughout this whole conversation, Abernathy Bridge is a hostage in all this conversation, in my opinion. So I think of maybe calling that out because there's ways to figure out some of that funding. But other than that, that's just a, personal, I think, opinion. But other than that, you guys did a really good job of figuring out and also this one pager, especially the desired outcome, makes Washington County a key player and a partner in solving this tolling issue, because you have people who are on the opposite ends of the political spectrum agreeing to this thing, that our desired outcomes that you pointed out here. Like, for example, we have the chair of Clackamas County couldn't be more opposite than Commissioner Hardesty in Portland, yet they agree that we need diversion day one. We need a timeline, for to align the regional mobility pricing project and the I-205. So I'm in big support, and you've been listening, especially in these platforms, and distilled our desired outcomes. And I'm thumbs up, and I'm happy to repeat. And more importantly, it really shows that we're supporting our other neighboring county, who we have cities in Washington County who are going to be impacted of this diversion. Our mayors have been saying, I need, WCCC, the last month was, we need a diversion plan the day of, not after. So I think you did a really great job of listening to the mayors, and you did a great job of listening to JPAC, conversations with JPAC and MPAC and the R1, and really, I'm really happy that Washington County is supporting Clackamas County, because they're going to bear the brunt, but also our cities in Washington County are going to also face that impact. So I support. I don't know if you're looking for thumbs up. You have 5 thumbs up, even though I only have 2. So good job, and I look forward to how this conversation goes on JPAC next month. That's the day we are going to vote. And if ODOT doesn't get their yes vote and it gets a no, then everything goes back to the drawing board. So just so we're clear.
So Commissioner Fye, you're our representative to JPAC, and we had this discussion last week in advance of the last JPAC meeting, but realizing that the topic, the decision timeframe was shifting out. Would you like us to weigh in on approving this letter this week, or waiting until we're closer to that JPACT meeting, or would you recommend, what would you recommend?
I think it's now that we're all here and this is fresh on our mind, maybe weigh in today so that our staff have a marching orders and because the lobbying doesn't end and ODOT needs this to move forward. So I think the more we can say, or how are you going to meet these demands, ODOT? What's the plan? And if they don't have a plan, then it's a clear cut. So I think Kristen and Stephen, I look to you to say, would I feel comfortable now? Would you feel comfortable, or do you want to? I think let's just go with it today.
So, yeah, so they've brought us a letter for us to weigh in on as we're the board. So it sounds, Commissioner Fye, like as our representative, you're putting on the table that we should move forward with submitting this letter now. And so let's put that question back in front of all of us and see. Commissioner Willie, Vice Chair Willie, we haven't heard from you, and Commissioner Treese, what do you think of that recommendation? I think we've heard clearly that Commissioner Rogers is not comfortable in signing on to such a letter.
Well, from my standpoint, this is a complex issue, and I certainly appreciate all the information. I have not been involved with a lot of the preliminary information on this, just listening to the conversation over the last couple of weeks. And Stephen and Chris, I think you guys have done a great job of summarizing that. So thank you for putting that in there. I'm okay with submitting this if Nafisa is recommending that we go ahead and submit this letter. I'm fine with following that lead.
I also appreciate the amount of work that the staff has put into this. I appreciate the consideration of all the parties that are involved, and I support the letter.
And I do as well. Commissioner Rogers, would you like to just be noted as
Just
abstaining?
abstaining. Yeah, please, abstaining.
Abstaining given your role.
Yes, thank you.
Staff, could you incorporate that?
We will do that. Yes. And
Terrific.
we'll get that letter finalized for your signature, Chair, and we'll get it sent off.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to the naming letter, the Creek naming proposal letter. Have you all had the opportunity to see that? I think the letter's very well crafted, and I appreciate that the teams put this together. Are there any other questions or comments? How about thumbs up? Okay, you got them all.
Great. Thanks so much.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you. Okay, so we're at 9:38. We have two short topics. I think we can probably at least try to get through both of them. Ms. Angie, we'll turn it over to you and Mr. Kalavar and Melissa Sansala to consider applicants for the Housing Advisory Committee.
Great, thank you, Chair. And I see those members of our team being promoted right now.
Well, good morning. Good morning, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. My name is Komi Kalaro, Housing Director. Today, we come in front of you for a list of applicants for the Housing Advisory Committee for your consideration. As a background, the Housing Advisory Committee consists of 15 members, 4 of whom are at large. The other 11 are members two who are assisted by the Housing Authority, that is program participants, a member involved in the finance profession, elderly member, a representative of minority groups, a representative drawn from social service organization, one from design, architecture, engineering, and one from real estate, one from urban and regional planning, and then property management, and the last one representing veterans. So with that, I'd like to introduce Melissa Sonsala, who is our Policy and Strategic Initiatives Coordinator, to walk us through the selection process and the recommendation. Melissa.
Thank you. Good morning. So we had five vacancies this year that we are looking to fill. The position for a resident participant came open last fall. We had an open position for a minority group representative when that term expired. Same thing with the urban or regional planner position. The veterans representative position has been open since about 2020. We've struggled with filling that one, and so we really focused on a lot of recruitment for that one this year. And then we had a member at large position that also opened last fall with when one of our members left. So we went through the application process and interview process earlier this year. We have 5 applicants that we are bringing forward for recommendation. We feel really good about these applicants. We are recommending Gina Briggs for the resident and participant role. She is a graduate of our FSS program and currently works with other people experiencing situations with low income and poverty, and she's just was a wonderful applicant. We're recommending Nina Stafford for the minority group representative position. She's a local real estate agent. We're recommending Karina Arendez for the urban or regional planner position, and she's with the county land use and planning. Why am I spacing on those words? But she was a fantastic interview. We're really excited to have her. We're recommending Nina Spar for the veterans representative position. She works with the local VA. And lastly, we're recommending John Epstein as our member at large. He recently retired from Wells Fargo. We are, again, very excited about the applicants we have, and we feel like they're a really strong group to bring onto our committee and bring a lot of life experience and expertise in their different positions. Any questions? Or Comey, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think you covered it well, Melissa. Thank you. The other applicants were equally good, but we only have opening for 5. So I wanted to make that note.
Yeah, and I did want to note that a lot of the other applicants that we have are already serving on other county boards and commissions. And so that was one of the things that we ended up using as a selection criteria process. If folks were on a different county board or commission already, then we prioritized different voices.
Commissioners, questions, thoughts? I see some thumbs. So I too approve of this list. So you've got 5 thumbs. I do have a question though. And Ms. Angie, this goes back to something that I highlighted a few weeks ago. I don't remember exactly when, and that is some community applicants for different boards and commissions who felt that they didn't get a touchback with regard to not being appointed. So after, what is the communications plan? And just as we've all seen in the packet and as you've brought it to life here, we were blessed to have so many people expressing interest, as well as folks who are connected into other boards and commissions. What is the communication plan for letting the folks who are not going to be selected, that we do appreciate them stepping forward, but we only, as you've said, we only had so many positions. So could you tell me a little bit about that?
Thank you for that question, Chair. So of course, we will be connecting with those that the board ultimately approves. And in addition, we will be reaching out to those that weren't and working with Amanda Garcia Snell on how do we institutionalize that follow-up so that these community members have opportunities for future engagement in other boards and commissions and are recognized for their saying yes to even applying.
Thank you very much. So you got all five of us in thumbs up. So we look forward to your bringing this to us at a board meeting for formal adoption.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thanks for your discipline. I think, do we have time to move forward with the RROMAC ones? Great.
Yes, and the team's on and ready.
Great, thank you, Chair. We're here today about appointments to the Rural Roads Operations and Maintenance Advisory Committee, RROMAC. And I've got staff members Todd Watkins, who's our Road Operations and Maintenance Manager, and Sherry McFall, who is our committee liaison for both RROMAC and URMDAC, the Urban Road Maintenance District Advisory Committee. So I think Sherry's actually going to talk us through very quickly. We actually have a larger number of vacancies than we have applicants in this case. So Sherry, do you want to go ahead and walk us through quickly?
Sure, thank you, Stephen. Good morning, RROMAC members. We have 2 applicants for RROMAC, midterm applicants this week, or excuse me, this meeting. We have a total number of 12 members in the committee, and we currently have 5 vacancies. So we have 7 sitting members, and then we have 2 applicants today. So that would be a total of 9, of course, leaving 3 applicants or 3 vacancies on the committee. Next slide, please. The applicants are Gary Virgin, who is a prior RROMAC member, who actually served several terms on RROMAC. But since there are vacancies, he expressed interest in reapplying. So Gary is the first applicant, and then Elizabeth Dudley is the second applicant. Elizabeth is a manager with a bus service in Forest Grove. So she knows our roads, county roads, very well, and her input will be very helpful. Next slide, please. That's it for the presentation. If you have questions, you can reach out to me or Todd Watkins, my division manager in operations.
Sorry, folks. Having trouble finding the mute button today. Any questions or comments, commissioners? Okay. I'll just say that I really appreciated how in the packet material, you made it clear that while, I want to make sure I get the name right. While Mr. Virgin has served on the committee before, he did have a gap in service. So it's not like we're just disregarding the term limit. So I really do appreciate him stepping forward, given the number of vacancies. He has brought useful information to the committee in the past. So I think that's a very fine solution. So I know I'm thumbs up. How about the rest of the commission? Yep, great. So we look forward to your bringing the slate for us to adopt.
I do want to take a minute to thank Commissioner Willie. He's done a tremendous job as the ex officio liaison for the board in advocating for the RROMAC committee members. He's been out there trying to get folks to join the committee, and Ms. Dudley is a direct result of his efforts to be out there getting folks aware of and participating in the process. So thank you, Commissioner Willie.
Great. All righty. Well, I think that's it for the items that we wanted to get to before our 10 o'clock meeting. I forgot to check, as usual, to see if board members had any particular questions or items on the board agenda before we move to that meeting. So go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
The one thing that I want to talk about is the Ukrainian Proclamation. And I'm very much in support, as you heard me talk last week about the folks in Ukraine who are suffering terrible atrocities. I was hopeful we might be able to reword this letter a bit and do a few things. One, and I know this is late and we don't have time, but this whole situation where it's a whereas in the first one with Russia, it's not Russia. The Russian people, I think we ought to be very supportive of. They have a dictator, a war criminal as a president, and we're saying of Russia there, and we're saying the leadership, be very clear that it's not all the leadership. You can see in the protests of a number of cities in Russia that people are not fond of what's going on. And I would like to be more clear about that. I'm trying to say that this is not just an illegal action, it's a criminal act. I mean, this is slaughter. It's not pleasant. I would like to see us take some, I realize we're a very small cog in a world economy, but I would like to see us be more proactive and say, even in our neck of the woods, Washington County will not do any business with any Russian-owned company. And we ask our vendors to sign the same pledge, as well as ask businesses in Washington County to sign a pledge not to do any business with Russian companies until this act changes. And that may be a big leap for all of you. It's not a big leap for me, and I will say that to the press as well. I think that we need to be very proactive and say criminality, atrocities towards mankind is not acceptable.
So Commissioner Rogers, if I might add, so this has been published and available since Friday.
Right.
I think given the nature of what is happening, if you have specific word changes you want to make at the meeting, that's great, and the board can entertain those. If, however, you want to see more extensive changes, and we might need to hear from our senior staff about those effects, then another avenue may be for us to move on today's proclamation, and you come back with a second proclamation for consideration at a future meeting. So those are just two different options we might consider.
Yeah, if I could comment, I commend their staff for bringing it forward. I support anything that we can say, but I like the idea of coming back with harsher comments, because it's not pleasant to see kids and people killed for no reason at all. This is not a good deal.
So just as I brought this proclamation forward and staff helped frame it up for the right legalese and presentation for action today, so too you can do that with staff for future consideration for whatever sort of phraseology you would like the board to consider.
Great, thank you.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Treese, go ahead.
I'm not going to be there for the board meeting, and I'd just like to publicly state that I recognize I can't vote if I'm not there, but I just want to publicly state that I support this amendment, or this proclamation, excuse me. So just for anybody viewing and for our staff, thank you for this work, and thank you for bringing it forward.
So D1, the proclamation is the added item, and then there was or is a PowerPoint for the second proclamation. So any other questions? Okay, well, sorry, I skipped that part as usual. We'll see one another at 10 o'clock. Thank you.